Thank you, comrade. So I'm going to open the meeting now to people on the floor. So if you would wish to speak, please raise your hand and we'll promote you to the panel. You can either speak with a contribution to the discussion or you can ask a question of the panel. It's up to you. So if you'd like to contribute or ask a question, will you raise your hand now? I know, Matthew, you wanted to make a contribution, didn't you? Can you promote yourself to the panel so we can see you and you can speak? We'll see what works, shall we?
I'm here to
Thank
start
you.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you, I mean, I can promote people, obviously, give me a list. So, no, the thing is, I think there's a few points. I mean, the first one really is what we confront really is US imperialism. And what we see here, obviously, is the fact that Israel actually has to request permission from the US in order to make any military move at all. And therefore, this is entirely in agreement with Washington. And it is the system of Washington's domination of the rest of the world which is actually promoting this. Israel is part of the mechanism of controlling the Middle East, and therefore it precisely exists because of that. And exactly the Americans, as has been said, wouldn't exist without American support. And it's precisely that system of imperialism, and that's what we really confront them. And obviously, we need to discuss that great thing. I think the other thing that comes out of this, the second thing that comes out of this, is the monstrous nature of our politicians. I mean, they would be cuter if they had horns and fangs. These people, really, no amount of death is too much for these people. No amount of suffering, no amount of torture, the deprivation of food, water, etc. Completely dead-eyed, and we should really draw the lessons of this, because it shows how dangerous these people are. They will do this anywhere. Quite clearly, that is what they are, and we should, basically just call them out and say, we need rid of these people because they're extremely dangerous. They're quite prepared to kill people in whatever numbers and by whatever means. They're showing us this. I think the final point is the unions, because it's the organised working class which has the power here, which actually builds all this stuff, moves all the weapons, moves all the supplies to and from Israel, and can stop the whole thing. And the question is obviously that clearly there's an effort, through the unions to prevent that from happening. And it's not casual. It's organised. I mean, the Trade Union Federation in the US is called the AFL-CIO, not for casual reasons, because it's integrated into the CIA. But it's actually then to say, well, the union bureaucracy is actually trying to prevent this action from happening, but we need to oppose it, and the working class itself needs to stop this. Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. So we've got a few questions in the Q&A before we get other hands raised, because these have been posted already. I'm going to post these questions to the panelists and read them out. We've got one question is, what actual powers does the UN and international community have to enforce a ceasefire? Demanding one is fruitless. Do we have any responses from the panel to that question, please?
Well, I think it's a mistake to put much faith in the United Nations. Don't forget the United Nations created the problem in 1947 when it partitioned Palestine. But the very structure of the UN is that the only people who have power in it are the 5 members of the Security Council. So any resolution criticizing Israel automatically gets vetoed by the United States. Leave aside the UN's role in a number of imperialist situations, such as in the Congo, the murder of Patrice Lumumba, its role in Haiti, and so on. I think the only power that has the only state that has the power to stop Israel is the United States. Without US weapons, Israel would be stuck. But clearly, I mean, Western Europe plays a part, Germany in particular, in the supply of weapons. So it doesn't surprise, it's no surprise at all that Palestine demonstrations are virtually outlawed in Germany. This supporting Israel is part of the German state's atonement for the Holocaust by supporting another Holocaust, in essence. That is the logic of it, isn't it?
Yeah, so make a distinction between the UN and the international community in the question, though.
I don't like the term international community. There is no international
Yeah,
community.
yeah. It's just a structure of opinions and power, isn't it?
So,
Yeah, yeah,
rules.
yeah.
But
Okay.
sanctions are possible, and expelling Israeli ambassadors is a possibility, and a domino effect is possible. We don't know how it will happen, whether it will happen. I'm just saying it is a possibility. And I apologize, I have to go, so I have to say goodbye.
All right, thank you very much, Ronnie.
I will just mention quickly, we haven't touched on that, and we obviously haven't got time, but there is the whole geopolitical issue that many powers are even moving their militaries, China, Russia, etc., and we have to take that into account. Some people say that we have already started a world war. I hope this is not the case, but it is a possibility. The other thing, I'd like to thank Stephen for sharing with us and connecting the dots, the historical to the present. And I'll also mention at that point also the legacy of Marek Edelman, staunch anti-Zionist and Buddhist, who wrote a letter of support to the partisans of the Warsaw Ghetto, partisans of the Gaza Ghetto. And finally, I will mention the book Defying Hitler, which was written during the rise of the Third Reich, and it echoes a lot of what we are seeing happening over the past decades in Israel. I'll leave you with that.
Patterns. Thank you very much, Ronnie, and all the very best. And we'll pass around information about your trial. Thank you, Ronnie. So we do have a couple of people who joined the panel, Norman and Steve, for making contributions and questions, but I do have a couple more questions to put to the panel. One from Anita Patel. What were your take-homes from Nasrallah's speech last week? Was he effectively announcing that Hezbollah would not intervene? I think you might have covered that slightly, Tony. Any other perspectives on that, please? Was that a surprise?
Well, I mean, the only thing to say about Hezbollah is it is part of the government of Lebanon. Decisions it makes, it is very conscious of the fact that if it gets into a war with Israel, although it's got, by all accounts, 100,000 plus missiles, there is no doubt that the Israelis will bomb much of Beirut as they did last time, and probably with a greater genocidal effect. So, I mean, that is uppermost in their mind, that they don't wish to embroil the whole of Lebanon in a new war. And that is their decision. And that, I mean, Israel has said it will bomb Lebanon back to the Stone Age. Although, of course, Israeli politicians and the Israeli state is very wary of tackling Hezbollah for the reasons that I've mentioned, that they have a considerable firepower. But at the end of the day, the Palestinians have themselves to rely on, I suspect. Certainly the Arab states. I mean, one thing I could mention is that if the people, the Arab peoples, were to overthrow their own regimes, I don't think it would be long before Israel goes, because Israel is there to guard over imperialism's interests, and it does that via client Arab regimes. So I have no doubt that revolution in the whole Arab East is part and parcel of getting rid of Zionism, because the Palestinians simply are not strong enough in the same way as the black South African working class was strong enough. And that is one of the differences with apartheid 30 years ago.
Thank you, Tony. So we've got the other question from Andrea. Let me just pull it up again. Oh, Adrienne Weller, which is about, I've lost it.
I think an end to Zionism requires an end to the US capitalist ruling class.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Requires.
Yeah, please comment and discuss not just imperialism but also capitalism. So an end to Adrian's view is an end to Zionism requires an end to the US capitalist ruling class, and that requires promotion of socialist feminism, presumably. Comments from the panel, please.
Well, I will, but I've been speaking a lot, so I thought I'll give way to...
Huda, would you like to comment on that?
I think the thing about Palestine is it is at the center of many global issues, one of it being Western imperialism, another being capitalism, and it really is a melting pot and an example of all of these things coming together to oppress the Palestinian people. But saying that, I don't necessarily believe that Palestine has to wait to be free until US capitalism ends. I think that it needs to be targeted as part of the campaign to free Palestine and to liberate Palestinians. But Palestinians can't wait for that. You know, this is happening right now. Israelis are literally pulling Israeli flags out on the Gaza beach. And we need to, I think, focus and put Palestine at the center of those struggles as it is, and focus on the liberation of Palestine, and everything else will come next. And so that's what I truly believe, is that the liberation comes first. And that part of that is fighting against those systems of oppression, which are oppressing people globally. And I think Palestine is at the center of that. And so I say that in the sense that the military-industrial complex in the US has to be targeted. I think it is being targeted now, but I think it needs to be targeted in a much bigger scale. And that does have to come from people within the imperial core. But at the same time, the people who are oppressed across the world have been fighting against US capitalism and imperialism for a very long time. But I think when we look at our positions in the world and our solidarity with the oppressed, I think we have to look at what we can do from where we are, which actually is one of the most important aspects of it, because the Israel's military-industrial complex is so globalized now that it does need people across the world to target it and to shut them down repeatedly.
Yeah, sure. In supporting and saving Palestine, we're also targeting the military-industrial complex, and thereby one of the main pillars of capitalism. Tony, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, people also said that you would never get rid of apartheid in South Africa until you had overthrown capitalism in the West. That isn't true. I think that betrays a kind of colonial mindset that unless imperialism is thrown from the heart, then it can't be overthrown anywhere else. But I don't think that's true. I think it is possible to overthrow Zionism. It will be difficult. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but given that we don't see any great movements to overthrow capitalism in the United States, are we simply going to ask people to wait indefinitely? No, I don't think that's so. But I do think, as I say, that the complicit Arab regimes, which in essence are bound hand and foot to Israel, they do have to be overthrown. And that is a precondition because of the balance of forces. But the overthrow of the United States capitalism, well, it will be very weakened if Israel goes. Without doubt. Yeah. If it loses control of the Middle East,
absolutely, yeah,
a blow to it. And I think that's the way to look at it.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade. So I'm going to go to the two people that we have on the panel, promoted to the panel, who have contributions or questions. So first of all, over to you, Norman. Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, I must say that this is, for me, the best meeting of the Socialist Labour Network that I've ever attended. I mean, because it is incredibly important and relevant to what's going on now, and where the people are dying. And I mean, for people who don't know, I'm the producer and the co-conspirator on making the film "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn, the Big Lie," which covers some of the same ground as Winstanley's book, essentially trying to debunk the idea that Jeremy Corbyn was and his supporters were anti-Semites. And now I think that myth is being, not just debunked, but kicked about and made fun of because of the way that the people are trying to use it. Israel and the supporters of Israel are trying to use that fake smears of anti-Semitism to defend their actions. Because I think with Tony was saying there's a massive propaganda war going on, and it's an incredibly important one. And as a filmmaker, propaganda is part of the whole world which we operate in. And we're working on a second film now, so we're following the events of what's going on. We don't know what's going to happen, so we don't know exactly how our film is going to turn out. But it's certainly the next film is going to be about what's happening in Palestine. And it strikes me that there is a huge opportunity here. Until October the 7th, there was a feeling that nothing much was going to change in the world. There was, Ukraine was occupying the headlines sometimes. But there was nothing, you just got the feeling, Donald Trump was coming up possibly to be the next president, but you didn't feel that things might change in any kind of good way. But now you get the feeling that even though there are these terrible things going on, that there's a chance for change. And the reason that I feel that personally anyways is what Al Jazeera all the time and at times Channel 4 and BBC are showing is something on the screen which is absolutely abominable. You've never had in the history of the world a chance to actually be a spectator of the most appalling crimes that you could possibly imagine being perpetrated on real people, on real Palestinians. And Israel's argument that the events of October the 7th, whether horrific or acts of freedom, liberation, or whatever they are, that they justify what we're seeing every day on the television, that is a completely ridiculous argument. And whatever our politicians say and what American politicians say, they can't keep up that total nonsense. There are some people who will believe it, but the vast majority of the people, a lot of them are going to be marching in London tomorrow, don't believe that. And they're going to believe it less and less the more they see it on the television. It's a terrible, terrible thing to see it, obviously, but it means that the people defending it are made to look, like the fake criminals that they are, including, I think, as Tony's already said, our own abominable Keir Starmer. But also, I think there are things, because what's happening is pulling up more and more people into the support against it. So, for instance, you've now got environmental activists like Extinction Rebellion supporting the big march tomorrow and explaining why they're supporting it. So you're getting what one of the people on our film said you needed to get change, which is a kind of a great sort of conspiracy from below, to quote Graham Bash, who's one of the people we interview in the film, of environmentalists, of socialists, of all sorts of activists getting together. And I think that's what I would make a plea for, is to make sure that we do bring these people together, and to quote Ronnie, to have people doing action in an effective way, because that's what we need to do. Because every day that goes past, and I'm completely in support of Huda and Ronnie in supporting direct action, I hope that we'll be able to come outside the Snaresbrook Crown Court and film the demos that happen from Monday of next week. Our camera person will be there, I hope, and film that. But we need to pull all these forces together as quickly as we can, all across the world, to make the biggest demonstration and the most powerful thing, including blocking the arms going in and whatever else we can do to stop what's going on. And I think it's feasible because of the increasing victory that we are having in the propaganda war. That is, the people who are just on the side of not killing people in huge numbers in front of our eyes. But yeah, I mean, I'd appreciate anything that the panelists would have to say about that. But that's what gives me some hope in the face of horrible, horrible pictures. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you, Norman. We've got Steve as well. We'll ask Steve to make his contribution, then we'll see if the panel's got anything, any responses to both of those contributions. Steve, over to you. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Esther. Great contributions from all the speakers. So I would like to just thank them for their contributions and the other comrades that have spoken. And I want to make a couple of points. One is that prior to the October the 7th, there was a big crisis going on in Israel, a crisis of democracy. Obviously, that has been overtaken completely by events. And we also have a big crisis of democracy here going on. We can see how what's happening with the Tory government at present. So we have to have some approach if we're going to have a movement in this country that links those two questions together, I would say. And Tony mentioned the idea of what a kind of new kind of Palestinian solidarity movement. And I think we have to take those things into account. I think Tony made, and I want to make this point, that 20% of Israelis are Arabs. That they are mainly working class part of Israeli society. And I think Tony made an absolutely vital distinction in his contribution. So I just want to emphasize this point between a Zionist Israel and a secular Israel, which is not a Jewish state and not a Jewish republic. And he made the point that South Africa was a white racist state, but South Africa was no longer a white racist state, and yet it still exists. So in a certain sense, another South Africa was possible. And I think another Israel is possible as well. And I think that movement that was taking place prior to October the 7th, and the fact that 20% of Israelis are Arabs, is something that we should be taking into account. I think it means we have to accept, I would argue, we have to accept that there is an Israeli nation, 80-20, but it doesn't have to be a Zionist nation. It doesn't have to be a racist nation. So I think when we're discussing Israel, that's what we have to take into account in looking for a democratic solution, a democratic and just solution to the problems.
Yeah, thank you. A number of people have raised parallels with South Africa. Of course, South Africa no longer has apartheid, but it has tremendous inequalities which continue to cause troubles. And people have drawn attention to the differences between South African apartheid and Palestinian Israeli apartheid. So those are important issues to consider, I think. Have any of the panel members got responses to the contributions from Norman? And by the way, Norman, thank you for the great work you're doing on the films, and also Steve.
Can I say something about the prospects of hope? I think we are seeing on our screens day after day whole seas of people rising up in the Middle East, one country after another. And it's another way of affecting US policy eventually, that they realize that they are losing foothold in the Middle East. And the more this goes on, the more chance there is that they may have to rein in the Israeli extremists. And I think this is a process that will grow as the atrocities grow.
Thank you, Stephen. There is hope of a fairly desperate kind, but there's hope nonetheless. Do any of the other panelists wish to respond to Norman or to Steve before we move on to Mike and Marie?
I'd just like to say thank you, Norman, for what you do, and we'd be happy to see you at Snaresbrook Crown Court. And I'd also like to echo that about hope. I think all of us are involved in solidarity movements because we believe, and we're fighting for, the liberation of the Palestinian people, and that we wouldn't be here discussing this or fighting this cause if we didn't believe it could happen. And I think that's echoed by millions, if not, hundreds of millions across the world. And we've seen points like this in history. Arguably, there's times when it feels difficult, but I think you have to keep fighting on that something this unjust and evil cannot sustain itself, and that eventually humanity will right this wrong, and I will just keep fighting until that happens. And I just touch on one of Steve's points that I think as a Palestinian and campaigner for Palestine, my hopes don't lie with the slightly lefty Israelis who still believe in occupation. It does rely. I think there are a lot of Palestinians who are in 48 who are you know, who are strongly connected to their Palestinian roots, and I think there's a lot of hope there. But for me, I didn't really gain much hope by seeing the protests within Israel against Netanyahu before October 7th, because most of those people were not against the occupation. And actually, you know, you see this a lot in Israel, that they unite. It's easy for them to unite when there's a massacre of Palestinians happening.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think many of us that felt that way about the internal protests. There was an argument that what was happening in Gaza really helped Netanyahu gain back some sort of democratic mandate. We'll go now to Marie, because Marie wanted to respond to Adrienne Weller's question about an end to Zionism. Marie, thank you for joining us.
I've pulled myself out of one.
Please unmute Marie. Hello.
Oh, hello. Yes.
I've muted myself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I would like to perhaps come back now to the direct action and waiting for capitalism to be overcome.
Yes.
Because there is a link between the two, but it's not just the direct action, is also in the trade unions, and it's less showy, it's less outstanding in the news, but nevertheless, what happens in the trade unions and what the trade unions do, it has great importance. I think that we should go back to what they've done in Belgium, in the airports, where the transport workers refuse to move the weapons. And I'm not saying that this is making a huge difference, but it's nevertheless the way to go. This problem is political. It's not just an agitational one. It is profoundly political. And what is in fact happening to the Labour Party is that it has stopped any debate which might pull it away from its connivance with the Tories. So this is why now they don't want to hear about Ukraine, or they don't want to, or they limit the discussion there, and they don't want to talk about the Palestinian question. And it is quite a dictatorship now in the Labour Party. But it doesn't mean that the political expression of the working class has finished in Britain. And so it seems to me that we need to look again at why, in what way we can be effective. For example, there's two fronts in the world which are opening. There is the Middle East against, in fact, fighting against, not like Matthew was saying, it's not just Israel, it is imperialism, which is the United States, the French, the English, the NATO, the European Union. That is what the problem is. It's not just a fight against Israel. In the Middle East, the fight is against imperialism. And there is another front, which is Ukraine. And in Ukraine, there has been imposed by NATO a government of Zelensky, which is a Banderite, a supporter of Bandera, who was Nazi. And so I'm not going to go on too long, but I want to link these things together. The fight of the Palestinians and the fight of the people of the Donbass and Crimea against Bandera, they are similar fights. And it is important not to just completely lost in individual actions, because these are the big forces. Blinken and Biden and the CIA, they went to Israel now to try to contain it, because they say to Israel, if you continue like this, we are going to have two fronts, the one with Russia and the one now here in the Middle East. And so we have to count on the world forces, not just discount them. And the process of history is not at the one's individual human scale. It is something that goes on for years and periods. And so I call on the comrades now perhaps to look into the trade unions. Tony was talking about Unite, and then what he's doing in Unite, we need to do it in other unions, and we could actually start a campaign of what resolutions we are going to push in the trade unions. Yeah.
Thank you, Marie, for answering that, and also for drawing those parallels. We should do well to remember that suddenly now Ukraine has totally disappeared from anything that's reported in the media, and that those struggles continue. I'm going to call on Mike now, because Mike, you've been waiting for a while. Would you like to unmute and make your contribution, please? Please unmute yourself.
I unmuted myself. Right. Okay. Thanks for such a high level of discussion to all the panel and contributors, actually. I mean, it really is going beyond the outrage to look at the structure of things, and also to look at historically why, for instance, Corbyn really failed to mobilize against the attacks on himself, which had a very significant effect for the 2019 election. So, this really cuts through many different contexts. I'm not so much going to make contribution as to ask further questions, if that's okay. I know it's at the end of the session, but nonetheless, the questions we have to keep on asking. I mean, one of the paradoxes of the Palestinian question is that even though they have been struggling to regain some kind of foothold in where they have lived for 75 years, and against what is, Israel from its inception, what it has done, they don't actually have any other nations, any other states who support them really anywhere in the world. And this is really quite a significant thing. Even those, the various sort of Arab and Middle Eastern states that have a formal acceptance do not really want to do anything about it, whether it's, I mean, we've seen most particularly, obviously, in the case of Egypt, but Jordan, UAE and Saudi, they don't want to rock the boat. They have their increasing relations with Israel itself, and they have they're necessary for them capitalist relationships with the United States as well. They really don't want to rock the boat. Likewise, India was a supporter of the Palestinians historically, is no longer now under Modi. Modi has built really close relationship with Israel, with Netanyahu in particular. And, he identifies what they're doing in relation to Palestinians as to what he wants India to do in relation to the Kashmiris. So there is that. Russia, again, has had a long sort of formal support for Palestinians, but actually is not by no means going out of its way, because there are arms supply relationships going from Israel to Russia at the present time, in terms of fighting Ukraine. So all of these states are also frightened of the democratic potential of their own people. That's certainly true of the states of the Middle East and North Africa, but it's true across the world. So the Friends of Palestine are the masses of people across the world who are the citizens of many countries, and who are really having to challenge their own states to support the Palestinians in the face of, this appalling genocide that's going on. It's true here. It's even true in the States, where a majority, polls show that a majority of people in the USA actually support a ceasefire. That, despite the incredibly strong Zionist American lobby. So I just wanted to leave one other question. What is the end game? What is Israel's end game for Palestinians? Do they want to, they want to kill as many of them as possible? Do they want the rest to be dumped into the Sinai? What do they want to do? And very finally, is there a motivation? There's one theory doing the rounds, which is that Israel's motivation is partly because they want to open a grand sort of super Suez Canal, which will capture a whole load of trade between the East and the West. They've caught the tail end of the petrocarbon trade, perhaps, but they are hoping, to challenge China's Silk Road. Is there? I mean, do people have any belief that that is part of Israel's thinking, or is it sheerly, as Tony says, the extermination of
Okay, thank you, Mike. Well, so what we'll do is I've got another. I think I'm going to pair your question. We'll have to do this quickly now because we need to close the meeting by 8:30, and we've got a lot of questions still to be asked. We're not going to get through all of them. We've got some people lined up to ask questions. So I'd like the panel just to respond to Mike and also to a question in the Q&A. With the Israeli majority gone stark raving mad, isn't it the case that military defeat is the only way the spell will be broken? How can that ever happen? How can a defeat be inflicted in any other or in another way?
I'll start if you want.
Yeah.
What is Israel's end game in regards to the Palestinians? Let's see if I can adjust my camera slightly. God, it's gone worse. Okay.
We don't need to see you.
Okay, thank you, comrade. I think the Israel wants to make the Palestinians disappear. They're perfectly happy to force them into Sinai and then have them dispersed throughout the Arab world. That would be their preferred solution. If that involves killing thousands, as is happening today, then they will be quite happy with that. But first, the Palestinians of Gaza, then the Palestinians of the West Bank, where it's hotting up. Don't forget, in Israel's cabinet, we now have open transferists. In fact, probably the majority of the cabinet are supporters of the transfer of Palestinians. And you have open Jewish supremacists, I mean, really neo-Nazis, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the police minister, Bezalel Smotrich, who is a proud homophobe and self-declared fascist. So as far as they're concerned, the Palestinians have absolutely no rights to any of the land. And Gvir in particular, and Smotrich as well. Smotrich said to Ayman Odeh, who's the leader of the Joint List, the Arab Jewish Party, dominated by Hadash, the Communist Party, that you are here by mistake. Ben-Gurion did not finish off the job in 1948. And I think that's absolutely clear. As far as they're concerned, the Palestinians in Israel, many of whom thought they would become equal citizens, they are learning that they are really a fifth column. That's how they are seen in Israel today. So you're having a wave of repression. Anyone who says anything on social media gets hauled in. 3 former Balad members of the Knesset have been arrested for speaking out. But no one who goes on social media and talks about wiping out the Arabs will feel the hand of the police. It's quite clear what it's about today. Israel does want to get rid of the Palestinians, with whom it's been in conflict with. I have to say, if they did do that, then Israel would probably turn in on itself and have a civil war. But I don't.
Okay, so we're going to have to move on quickly now, because I have offered question opportunities to another 3 people, and we've only got 6 minutes left. So Adrienne, so Marie responded to your question. Did you have anything to add?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I do have something to add. There have been a number of comments in the chat, and it's gone by fast, so it's hard to, We need an international perspective on ending capitalism in order to be able to maintain any kind of freedom anywhere. The point is that apartheid ended in South Africa, but oppression didn't, racism didn't.
Yeah.
You have black capitalists in the ANC demolishing their own black working class. It's an international issue, and I never meant it to be just capitalism in the United States. No, you have a fight, and that fight has spider webs, and the central spider is US capitalism now, at the moment, the biggest capitalist. And so you have to have a broad perspective. You have to fight for an international solution while focusing on the fights that are going on right now. Otherwise, you just fight here, there, the other place. It's got to be connected. And I've seen so many speakers in front of thousands of Palestinians and hundreds of Jews. They won't mention capitalism. They won't mention international socialism. They won't mention things that need to connect and give us a broader goal. There were so many millions in the Arab Spring. They didn't have the right goal or the right leaders, and they didn't get anywhere. Numbers aren't everything.
Yeah, sure, Adrienne. And I think Marie responded to the sentiment of some of the things that you're saying there. Completely acknowledge, understand what you're saying. Thank you for that contribution. We're going to try and get quickly contributions from who have we got? Abra. We've lost one of the people that was listed to question. We've got Abra Bashir and Pam. So we've got 2 more. But I don't know if Abra is still, can't see him or her.
Yes, they're here.
Yeah. Abra, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, we can't see you. Is that all right?
That's fine. How do you get to see me? I don't know.
Well, only if you want us to.
Okay.
We can just hear you if you prefer. But
Well,
carry on.
You can see me if you wish. Yeah, human being like you.
Yes, carry on. Thank you.
Yes, wonderful discussion, and things have sort of culminated over many centuries to where we stand today. So, like I said in my sort of comments, we need to sort of, whoever has managed to retain their sense. There aren't many, because most are subjugated, as Adrienne said, with capitalism, with the capitalist sort of paradigm, and within the power politics of what we have within nations and between nations, we are all sort of crunched and squeezed and moving around like headless chickens within these 3, you could say, deluded, or some of them may think that they're doing some good, but they're not. It's power politics within and between nations, which in the Quranic text is regarded as pharaonic, Pharaoh. That is what Pharaoh symbolizes. And then you have Qarun, which symbolizes the capitalist mindset, right? And then you have Haman. These are the 3 forces that Moses had to confront. Haman is the religious, the clergy, who in partnership with power politics, and they prey on the hopes and aspirations of power politics and capitalism. And that is exactly what we are back in that same sort of paradigm again. So what's happened is over sort of through the course of human history, you had messengers who sort of tried to extract mankind from the grip, from the talons of these forces. But these forces somehow managed over and over again to regain control. Do you follow me?
Yeah. Can you just summarize in a final sentence? Because I understand this is it's an important matter of principle and philosophy that you're raising here, and parallels with different cultures and ways of thinking. It's very, very important. But can you summarize? Because we need to move on to Pam.
Yeah. So these are the three forces that sort of form, you could say, the clutches of tyranny.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And these are what we have to extract mankind from.
Yeah.
So Bani Israel, for example, Bani Israel, as in the Quran it's mentioned, Bani Israel, it's a state. It's not a people. It's a state of human beings under the clutches of Pharaoh, Haman, and Karun.
Okay, I understand. Okay,
understand?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for that. It's a really interesting contribution. And finally, we're 1 minute over, but Pam, I've promised Pam that she can speak. So Pam, can you make the final contribution to the meeting? And as you're a member of the steering committee, you can thank everybody on my behalf. You still there, Pam? I think Pam may be gone. All right. Well, I have to apologise to all of those people who raised their hands with questions and contributions. This is such a massive and important topic. We simply didn't have time to get through all of the questions and contributions. Thank you, especially to our speakers. We wish all the best to you, Huda, and we'll pass information around about how we can support you. It's lovely to see you again, Steve. Thank you for your contribution. And of course, Tony, too. I thank you, everybody, for attending this evening. I wish you well for this weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.